Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on workforce, brought to you by Plant Services and Dude Solutions. I'm Tom Welk, the Chief Editor of Plant Services, and I'd like to thank you all for joining us today, whether you're joining us live today or joining us on demand. This webinar is sponsored by Dude Solutions, a leading software as a service provider of operations management solutions to education, government, healthcare, senior living, manufacturing, and membership-based organizations. For nearly 2 decades, Dude Solutions has inspired clients to create better work and better lives. Before I introduce today's speakers, there are a few housekeeping issues I'd like to review with you. On your screen, you should see several primary sections. The upper left, or audio control section, allows you to adjust the volume of the presentation. Just hover over that section with your cursor until you see the audio volume control and adjust it to your preference. To the right, in the largest section, is where today's presentation slides will be displayed. Under that slide window, you will see a chat section where you can chat live with fellow attendees. To the left of the slide window is the Ask a Question box, and this is where you can type questions for the presenters at any time during today's webinar. We will get to as many of those questions as we can during the live Q&A session following the presentation. And for those questions that come in on demand, or for those questions we cannot get to here on live day, the presenters will address those questions with you privately by email after the webinar. Also, at lower left, the handout section contains a link to the full set of today's speaker slides, as well as a case study on Jake's Finer Foods, a white paper on navigating the workforce, and a guide to becoming a preventive maintenance all-star. Finally, at the bottom of your screen, you should see icons for additional features. By hovering over each icon, information about it will be displayed. If you have any technical problems, please type in your question or your concern in the Ask a Question box, and one of our technical engineers will assist you directly. If you need a better view of any section, particularly the slide window, you can enlarge those sections by clicking on the box in the top right corner of the section next to the X. If you accidentally close out any sections, you can get them back by clicking the Restore icon at the bottom of the screen. It's the leftmost icon in the shape of an arrow in a circle. This webinar will be archived, and we encourage you to direct coworkers to the recorded presentation. And finally, at the end of today's presentation, we'll ask you to complete a brief survey to provide some feedback that we can use to improve future webinars. And now, I'd like to welcome today's speakers, James McGavero and Paula Chance, who will speak on the topic of the workforce gap is real, how technology is your safety net. James McGavero is a facilities maintenance manager at Jake's Fine Foods based out of Houston, Texas. James has over 9 years of experience as a maintenance and operations professional. Paula Chance has spent his entire career devoted to optimizing maintenance teams by enabling data-driven decisions and actionable insights. Paul currently serves as the Senior Manufacturing Advisor for Dude Solutions. Welcome, James and Paul, and thanks for presenting today.
Thank you, Tom. It's an honor and pleasure to be here today. Today's webinar topic, the workforce gap is real, and how technology is your safety net. Key topics we're going to cover today. Start off by talking about more of the demand side, today's workforce, the state of the current labor market, how our teams are formed, more of the demand side. We'll also talk about the supply side, skill sets, and how they've changed and how we need to adapt to that. And the final section we'll get into, which is your safety net, is all about how technology and how that can future-proof your operations. So the workforce gap is real. Some statistics to go through as I work around this screen here. 7.6 million, that's the number of unfulfilled jobs in this country, operations-related positions, but only 6.5 million people looking for work. We have a million shortage. 10 million is the shortfall over the next 10 years. We are also an aging society. 1 in 5 Americans will be 65 or older by 2030. 50% of operations personnel are set to retire in the next 10 years. Picture looking around your organization, look around your operations team, your maintenance professional team, and half of them are going to be gone in the next 10 years. 25%, a pretty significant percentage, are made up by Generation Z. These are the younger generation by the year 2022. So we have major changes that are coming or are already starting. It's the first time in ever we have 5 generations working side by side with one another. If you look on the right-hand side, you can kind of see the breakdown. Obviously, the traditionalists is a very small number of them, but they're still around, and they have an amazing wealth of information that they've built up in their careers, all the way down to this Gen Z, the youngest generation. So you've got different styles. You've got different ways people communicate with one another, but you also have amazing opportunities that we can work together as a group. Susan and Chuck. Every organization has a Susan and a Chuck. You might be the Susan or Chuck watching this webinar today. Susan, she knows every ins and outs of your maintenance team. She knows every work order. She knows every supplier, every vendor. She knows everywhere the assets are throughout the facility. She's sort of the lifeblood of your organization from that administrative office standpoint. Chuck is the guy who's been there for 20, 30, 40 plus years. Chuck's the guy that can change that filter blindfolded in a hurricane if he needs to. Chuck's the guy you go to when you're not sure how to get your job done. We need to honor and capture the Susans and Chucks of your organization because they have amazing information to give us, and they're not going to be around working for a whole lot longer. So is your workforce keeping you up at night? How are we going to replace those soon-to-be retiring employees? How are we going to handle the competition for skilled labor? There's a lot of openings and not enough people looking for these. How are you going to find those next well-qualified technicians? How are you going to expand your skills to grow and do your best work and increase your career? And how are you going to get your team to learn these technologies? We'll go over all of these in the presentation today. So let's start with how do you fill the gaps in your workforce? Looking at the some stats again, 25%, a quarter of your staff is going to be on the much young side. Fortunately, that group is the most likely to 21, 25-year-olds are most likely to be looking for mentoring opportunities, but followed by, interestingly enough, the 50-plus-year-old crowd. Because the older generation, to get to know the modern technologies and so forth, are the second group that will be most likely to go through mentoring to learn these new and changing workforce technologies. 86% of employees cite poor communication for workplace failure. That's a particular pet peeve of mine. Poor communication is an egregious sin when it comes to how you treat your team. And because you have 5 generations theoretically working together, how you communicate to that young kid who's in the break room next to the person who's in their more senior years, we have to really learn how to communicate with these people, how to train them, how to mentor them, so we can really ensure that they're happy in their positions and they stay around and do their best work. So how do we do this? We've got to find common ground between generations. And to do that, let's focus on what aligns the generations, not necessarily the differences. A drive to be successful. Everybody, sometimes it's different from one person to another. We all want to be successful in our roles. We all want our organization ultimately to be successful. We all have a human connection. We want to be heard. And that might be in different ways. Team morale. You always have some of those bad apples that might be stirring the pot, but for the most part, we want to work well with our team. And again, these are all of different generations, different ages. And at the end of all this, if we can find this common ground, this will translate to providing better customer service. And I consider customers your fellow workers, your fellow teammates in your organization, and that will ripple all the way beyond to your end user customers as well. So let's start with looking for learning opportunities and embracing mentorship. It doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter your age. Everybody can be a student and everybody can be a teacher. You have to use those strengths and you have to take turns learning from one another. Chuck, who can change that filter blindfolded in a hurricane, has a lot to teach the younger generation who has never done those roles before. And likewise, when Chuck needs to learn how to use a mobile device more efficiently to open up work orders, Chuck can rely on some of his teammates to train him to do that. So everybody is on that same team. We have to look to work together and look for those mentorship opportunities to help expand those skills. We can do a lot of this in-house within our organization, but there's a lot of other educational resources. Community colleges in particular are doing a great job at helping find educational opportunities to teach us some of these technology skills and so forth. Let me turn it over to James. I'm sure James has got some real-life stories about this topic.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, I'd love to touch on everybody's a teacher and a student. Taking that knowledge from Chuck or Chuck at your facility and pairing that up with a younger person in the workforce, somebody that's eager to learn what Chuck knows, but also has that skill set on the technology side to kind of help, again, bridge that gap. And something else that it does, too, is it keeps that communication open between the two and really shows that everybody's on the same team and is working towards the same goal. Something that, we've done is you take a Chuck and you pair him up with somebody that's good with the technology side, maybe a younger mentor. And as they follow around Chuck, they're following these processes that he's doing, and they're trying to put it in a digital format or take pictures, write it down, and keep that going, and then kind of show Chuck later on how that works. And using the strengths of your team. So, Chuck is a workhorse. When everything goes south, everybody goes to Chuck. Lean on that and try to get that knowledge extracted from him so everybody's kind of on the same page.
Excellent points. So another big thing is to retain your talent. It costs an organization an astounding 10 times more to train a new employee versus retaining existing ones. I mean, that is a very telling number right there. You really need to retain your current talent. Clean, lean, intuitive tech helps you retain this talent. So, and there's a lot of examples. We're going to go through some of these within the presentation. Allowing team members to transfer internally faster, shorting learning curves, promoting flexible or remote working hours, leveraging the mobile device because you can use your mobile device even if you're not in plant or you're traveling or whatever it may be. Having those tools to make that done. Just make it easier for your workers to actually get the work done. If you have good systems, good tools, good SOPs and so forth, it's going to make their jobs easier. They can get more done. Encourage phased retirement. Well, some people just want to get out of there. That's understood, but not everybody. Allow workers to return part-time or through project contracting. And even things like adding ergonomic improvements to cater to older generations. I read a very interesting study preparing for this webinar, how an auto manufacturer retooled one of their production lines where they installed an older workforce on that line, but they moved things lower and they made things that were more accessible so they didn't have to crane their necks and lift their arms in the air and stood on more comfortable floor pads. And as a result, an older generation was able to keep up with those same demands. So ergonomic improvements can really make a difference as well. James, what have you got going at your plant around these different topics?
Yeah, for time's sake, I could talk about each one of these, but really the ones I love is the transferring internally, promoting within is something I'm huge about. If you see a guy out there really humping it, has some snap to him, and you can just tell there's an eagerness with him, why not take the time aside, bring him over, talk to him, and really see what his goals and aspirations are. And hopefully that aligns with something that you're looking for. We've done that with sanitation guy, it just always looked like he could do more. So we brought him to the side and said, hey, would you be interested in doing some of these PMs and that kind of stuff? And it's worked out fantastic for us. Promoting flexible or getting to your work remotely, just it being easier to look at what is on my plate for today in a digital format. Say he has everybody almost has a smartphone nowadays. If they can go in there on their smartphone, they go, all right, look, I got this, this, and this. It's kind of prioritized for me. I know what's requested of me today. I need to meet these expectations. Everything's transparent. I think that's a key to communication. Everybody knows what's going on day in and day out, and being able to provide that technology to the team member, I think also helps retain them. And because the work is much easier now, it's not what am I getting into today when I walk through the door? You already kind of know how your week's going.
Good points. Good points. Well, change. Change to me screams opportunity. One thing you can say about the changing workforce, aging, changing workforce, is every organization, including your competitors, are all in this together. So this is where you really have to look at this as an opportunity, because you can look at it as an opportunity to get a leg up on your competition and to create happier workforce in addressing this. So yes, it's coming, but it's also a great opportunity to make improvements. So next section, the skills gap is real. 80% of organizations agree there's a skills gap. And we say skills gap. That's the ability for your current workforce to really understand and use the tools and the technology that are in front of them today. So fortunately, most organizations do recognize there's gaps here. 108 million workers hold jobs that require moderate or high digital knowledge, digital software, mobile device, HMI on your different assets, and so forth. 40% say the changing skills requirement will have the biggest impact on their job over the next 5 years. There's a lot of things that are going to impact your organization in the next 5 years. 40%, that's a pretty significant chunk. Recognize that this changing skills requirement is a big hurdle and opportunity that they're going to face. 3 ways you can address this. We used a great study by Deloitte, a very reputable consulting organization. There's 3 key skills you need to succeed in this changing workforce: technical, digital, and soft. And soft is not software. We'll get into that. Soft skills. So how do you fill the gaps in the skills of your team? Technical skills are paramount these days. Maintenance professionals, operations professionals, that you are going to have some need for technical skills, in some cases extreme need for technical skills in their operations. We know there's a lack in the market force. We need to fill those gaps. You need to create training opportunities, apprenticeships, mentorships, company-sponsored trainings. These can all pay off. I mean, think about it. Chuck, when Chuck first came on the scene, there was very little, if any, digital tools or any kind of digital software that was being used day-to-day operations. A lot of analog gauges. You can see in that lower left-hand side, you see a digital multimeter. Next to it is pre-Chuck's time, but an example of a very, very early generation multimeter. These tools have changed quite a bit. And your newer generation that are coming in, your Gen Z, those kids are going to adapt to this pretty quickly. It's the older generation that's going to have a harder time. Thermal cameras are another example. We used to do maintenance by smell and touch if it was hot. Now we've got these great tools to do it. And we've got to make sure our team can understand and use these. James, do you have any stories around this?
Yes. Really, to the analog gauge, we were going through our engine room and starting to replace stuff that's kind of old, end of life, and we started looking at the digital, transducers to really on our gauge side of things, and say that Chuck was not. We had a team member that really wasn't, open to that idea because analog doesn't lie. He knows, he's seen it for 20 plus years. He knows what this gauge does. He knows the readings very well. Well, with the new technology, they're pretty intuitive in the fact that I can produce that analog look for them, but still get the digital side of it too, so to where I can start to trend stuff. When Chuck's not around, when I'm not around, when people aren't in the engine room and we need to know what happened, being able to have that digital side for record keeping and going back and looking at it and trying to figure out, this is doing something weird, but every time we go to look at it, the gauge looks fine, but being able to pull that history really is a added value to us, and at first there was some fight in him to come over to the new era with that gauge, but after he started using it and seeing that he could really look at the data on the back end, now he's a great proponent of it. He loves those gauges, and so now we've moved into switching everything over to the digital side, and he loves being able to look at those reports and kind of see how things are trending out.
Great examples. Thanks, James. So digital skills. Now, this is where we're crossing over into the software world, and there's great tools to help us. Using a smartphone, using a tablet, using your desktop computer to look at your work orders. There's all kinds of amazing software-related tools that we can use. And your software vendors are there to help you with virtual and on-site training on those digital software-type tools. You think back to probably Chuck's early days, although CMMS, Computerized Maintenance Management Software or System, software to help you manage your work orders, your preventive maintenance, your inventory, all that type of stuff. If you are just a paper-based, manual-based system to keep track of your maintenance, some people say maybe you can get it done. I don't think you can. You really need an automated system. If you want to get done more with less people or people that are retiring, you really need to have an automated system, not just in your desktop on your browser, but also your mobile device. But when you can come into your work for your shift and you can look on a screen or your mobile device and see how many PMs you have that day, how many emergency work orders, or if you're a supervisor, see what is my team doing today, how many parts am I low on, right there at your fingertips, that can really help you get your job done better. So those digital skills are very important. James, I'm sure you've got a comment around this.
Yes, Paul. I love this view. I'm very familiar with this view day in and day out, and so is my team. The stack of papers on the left represents so much. I mean, moving into this role, this was a common occurrence. Night shift, day shift, you get a stack of papers. What gets shuffled, what gets lost, what falls in a trash can. You can lose a lot of information that way, and having this digital side and the skill set to kind of manage that, and now it's so intuitive and easy to do, it's silly not to. And looking at the PMs, you look at these KPIs, and it kind of gives you a grade on how your team's operating, and maybe where you have some opportunity for coaching and some opportunity to praise some team members that are really stepping up and knocking some PMs out and keeping everything in the green, if you will.
Good point. Soft skills. So soft skills are we're not, the hard skills are the tools and the software and all this. Your soft skills, communication, collaboration, listening, critical thinking. An example that I use is you might be in a break room with a Gen Z kid who just got out of trade school, sitting next to an older person who maybe was in the twilight of their career, Vietnam veteran, we'll use as an example, where the only thing they have in common with the kid sitting next to him is that kid plays a lot of Call of Duty on his Xbox. You really need to figure out a way that you can get your team to communicate effectively with one another, given the fact that there's such generational differences between them. How do you collaborate with people of different skill sets and of different ages and so forth? Listening is absolutely critical to listen to what they're doing, and your critical thinking. You really have to think about how can you develop your soft skills as managers and as team members. James?
Yes, open communication is number one. And I think if you have that open communication, collaboration, listening, and all the critical thinking comes together with that, you got to promote that culture internally. Give that opportunity. Set some time aside. Whether it's toolbox talks in the morning, or safety meetings, or whatever it is. Just kind of leave 5 to 10 minutes, and then see if it needs to be more on that communication side, and let people talk to each other. And if one shift's having an issue, bring it up to the other shift and let everybody kind of join in and solve that problem.
Good points. Well, using technology can be your safety nets. There's great tools we have, technology-related tools that can really help you bridge the skills and aging workforce. So here's what we know about technology. 95% of organizations agree a digital workplace is important. I chuckle when I see that statistic because I wonder about the 5% who don't think that, what they do. Maybe they crochet or something like that where they don't need a computer at all. So obviously the digital workplace is critical. 73% of organizations say that 80% of their apps will be SaaS or cloud or internet by 2020. So that's a great thing. Is general manufacturing and maintenance professional related industries are accepting that we can use the cloud and the applications on the cloud to our advantage. 45% of organizations report improved customer satisfaction as a result of the digital workplace. So when we can automate, when we can improve our operations with technology, especially software, that will ripple beyond the maintenance team. That will go to your production and to your finance and accounting, and ripple beyond that to your actual customers in the marketplace by really automating some of this stuff. At the end of the day, we need tools that will help us do more with less. We need to be lean. And there's all kinds of great tools to do that. And if we can be more efficient with our operations with these tools, this is going to help us address our retiring workforce and skills gap type situations. How are we going to do that? Well, there's a number of ways. I think the most important thing with this changing and especially aging workforce is to document your work. As information passes from hand to hand, good digital documentation is critical. We know Chuck can change that filter blindfolded in a hurricane, but Chuck's the only one who can do it that way. We need to capture that. So your work orders, especially your preventive maintenance and even your common corrective maintenance, really any daily operational tasks that you're performing, you need to document it. Equipment and asset orientation. Know where everything is. Know the relationship, parent-child, the parts and everything that you use within those assets. Where are they? Your safety, your compliance records. So there's a number of great ways to do that. For example, I know some of this text is hard to see, but left-hand side, you have a list of all of our preventive maintenance routines that we have in our Asset Essentials solution. And you can see in the right-hand side step-by-step instructions of exactly what that technician should need to do. The bottom one's even better, is not only can you have step-by-step instructions, but links to videos or pictures where I can watch Chuck go ahead and replace that filter step-by-step. You've got to take the time to capture and document that. James, do you have any comments on this?
Yes, I absolutely love this workflow here. And the nice thing too, Paul, is that it's ever evolving. So, as we carry out these PMs and these scheduled tasks for work here, if something needs to be addressed or changed or added and modified, you can do that continuously until it's perfected to a point where everybody understands what they're supposed to do and how to complete it in the safest manner. Having the videos and the manuals at your fingertip ready to download, it keeps your team out in the field on the task instead of having to come back to an office, draw up those documents, pull them from a file, a folder. You may not know where it is, or somebody might have it right now doing the same thing on the other side of the plant. But having it all digital and accessible from anywhere is so critical to running an efficient maintenance team.
Awesome. You can also capture all your safety documentation, your lockout, tagout procedures, your job safety assessments, any of your compliance-related documentation. Links to external websites with good training materials. There's just a lot of great information that can all be tied into those PM routines and safety operation procedures and so forth. James, have you done any of this?
Yes, we put a lot of our lockout, tagout procedures that are available for, job-specific tasks. Say if we're working on a certain vessel, it's going to have its own lockout, tagout procedure, and there's no room for complacency anymore. OSHA's cracking down harder than ever. Fines are going up. And being able to have that document for them to read through before they complete this task and just having it available, really covers us in the end and make sure that our team is doing it the safest way possible.
Yeah, totally agree. Track and analyze. You need to know what work is being completed every day, and probably more importantly, what's not getting completed. A good maintenance management system is going to help you track that work, and it's going to show you the resources you need. It's going to identify where you have roadblocks, missing parts or parts in the wrong location, or workflow of how we're requisitioning staff to get to appropriate work orders. Know when to hire, when to look for possibly contract, or even maybe when we may not need to hire in a certain role. Really identify where we need that precious increases or decreases in our team. And better communicate status and progress. Let your production team automatically get email notifications or notifications on their mobile device if an asset has to go down for critical maintenance. So there's just great ways to use a maintenance management system to track and analyze that.
Yes. If I may, Paul.
Yeah, please, James.
Being able to identify your bottlenecks quick is very critical. If you can see something trending where it seems like every time we go to this area, it's a highly maintained piece of equipment that's a little finicky, maybe we need to start keeping a critical, parts list for just that piece of equipment. Operations, knowing what we're doing and when we're doing it also helps them to better schedule their workload and kind of know what's going on. And there's no longer, well, he didn't tell me that, hey, this was going to go down, so it really affects our production levels. I'm able to send emails to who I need to send them to make sure that we're all on the same page and that it's going to work well for everybody.
Yeah, I love it. Some of the screens we have right here is going to reinforce that. Like I said earlier, when I log in to Asset Essentials, when I start my shift, I know exactly what my team is working on. I know how many work orders are late. I know how many parts I'm going to need to order. At the lower left-hand screen, I can easily get to a great list of all of my work orders, properly prioritized or by different work groups or departments, whatever it may be. Upper right, I can see the same information on my mobile device. I know while I'm walking around, or if maybe I'm at a conference, or I'm not saying you should be checking work when you're on vacation, but if you have to, you can pull that up wherever you are. It's one of the great things about cloud or SaaS type applications. Bottom right is a view of my PM schedule, looking into the future. I can meet with my production supervisor and say, hey, I need to get access to these pieces of equipment for these preventive maintenance work orders. So you have all of that type of information directly at your fingertips. Embracing new technology. Technology change is a fact of life. If you don't adapt, you fall behind. And remember, we're all in this together, you and your competitors. So if you keep your head in the sand and think, I can't afford that technology, your competitors are not thinking that way. They are taking advantage of these tools. It all starts with, a willingness to try something new and to see those benefits. Dude Solutions is an organization where we've been doing this for 20 years. We've been creating and successfully implementing work orders management, computerized maintenance management systems. We have more than 12,000 clients. We've got a lot of experience for what it takes not only to put good software in front of our clients, but to make sure that it is implemented correctly so we can really help do more with less and take advantage of the team we have now and really ease into this changing and aging workforce as elegantly as we can. So and we're in the final segment here, how do you use technology to start future-proofing today? This is really important to highlight the benefits. I'll tell you the least successful software implementations I have personally seen in my long career in this is when an organization acquires a new software program and then the team shows up on a Monday and have no idea and they say, well, we've got new maintenance software. We're going to start training at 9 today. Be ready. You can't do that. You need to make sure your team can see how technology is going to solve these problems and make their job easier and be more productive. And I'm a big believer when you're looking at either getting a good CMMS system or are looking to improve the one you have, you got to make sure you involve the people that are using it. And I'm not saying you have to have every voice in the entire organization, but you've got to get early involvement from the team. You've got to get that buy-in, that they see the capabilities, they see those benefits. That creates a win-win situation. James, I know you have a good story on this one, how you went about that.
Yes, my process was somewhat difficult, but we overcame those challenges, and I think the critical part to overcoming those challenges is the early involvement. Kind of my situation was a little unique. I had a CMMS software. It was a challenge to use day in and day out. So hey, look at this latest and greatest one. This is going to work. Well, we already had a bad taste in our mouth with the previous software, but showing them the new software, walking through the demos with everybody, getting everybody on the same page. If there's some questions that need to be asked, ask them. There's nothing silly to ask here, because really this is designed to make our life easier in the maintenance realm and facility management side. We got to ask the questions that may seem silly, but if we don't ask those, you're not going to buy into it, and you need to know that your questions are answered, and in that way, there's no gray areas moving forward. Like, does it do this? Yes, it does this. How does it do it? Is it easy? Is it intuitive? And early involvement, I think, is critical in that, and that's something we did. And it was a timely process, but at the end, we're much better for it.
That is the investment you make in those early days, which may be a challenge at the time, pay off in spades. It's such a great investment of time. Find your champions. Your champions are the team members who welcome technology. And with that earlier buy-in, as you start to get people to think, I can see how this software, how this tool is going to benefit my organization, you will empower them to encourage and train other employees. It's always good to strategically have a handful of people, especially in that early phase when you're looking at that, see it, and then they can evangelize essentially the benefits to the rest of the organization. It's a wonderful way to go about this. James, have you had any experience around that?
Oh yeah, we praise our champions, and we utilize them as well. You have a guy that's excited about using the software. He's successful at using the software. You really lean on them to help get the rest of the team where they need to be. Just whether it's day in, day out task, or if it's, hey, set aside and let's spend, 45 minutes with John on going through his work orders and how it looks on the mobile side, because that's 99% of the time they're on the mobile side. Dig in it with them, let him ask you the questions, let him walk through it, and just kind of show him that it is easier than maybe he's making it out to be, and, eliminate those challenges that he's facing.
Good examples. Yes, thank you. Provide ongoing training, ongoing support. You need to make sure it's there until everybody is up and running. And really, you're going to have new hires. You're going to have people transfer from different roles. You always have to be ready and willing to make sure the team has both external and internal sources. So external sources, like, for example, with our Asset Essentials product, Dude Solutions, we've got awesome training programs and implementation services and videos and all that kind of stuff. So no matter what technology you're asking your team to use, make sure that you have good support from the vendors that are providing you with that technology. But you also have your internal team. The best people to train other people is by just, spending time together in their day-to-day operations. Those champions are great at helping bridge some of those external training resources. James, do you have any experience around this?
Yes, we're huge on continuous training. Nothing bad comes from always trying to learn more, and even going through the same programs and help videos and walkthrough and previous webinars and that kind of stuff to try to grab more data out of that every time you view it or watch it and take courses. Like I said, your champions typically want to continuously learn. What's new? What can the software do for me that I'm not currently utilizing? And having a good support, base for that. Like on Asset Essentials, you go to the help page. There's videos there. There's play-by-play on how to do this, how to get there. it's fantastic, and just keeping that available for your team is also very important. Let them know that that's welcomed and is promoted.
Awesome. Well, in conclusion, before we turn this back over to Tom and for some housekeeping and some Q&A, many fields are changing. Operations management is no different. So, as a recap, large percentage of the workforce is retiring. It's a challenge to find skilled labor to replace. I think we all can agree, and we're experiencing that. Future-proof and risk mitigate your work through technology and tools. It's not only going to help you maintain where you're at, it's going to help you rise. I mean, this is where these changes, and some people look at it as hassles and headaches. This can give you a competitive edge. This can allow your organization to grow. And it's important to look at it that way as an opportunity. And I think my favorite in this is to be a part of that change in a way that is positive and leave a legacy you're proud of as a team. When we look back, when Chuck does retire, and Chuck Jr., who's been there for 15, 20 years, will refer, you should have seen the days when Chuck would PM that asset. It was like watching a person, like a ballet person, just running through that just amazingly. Now you can see it. You can the legacy that Chuck and Susan have, you can capture that information. You can see videos. You can see pictures. It's part of that history. And as long as those assets are still being maintained, Chuck will still be there with you. So I'm a big believer that this aging workforce, this changing workforce, that legacy that these people have spent their careers building, we can really honor them by capturing that information. So before I hand over to Tom, I really want to thank James for being on this webinar today. So Tom, I'm going to send it back over to you.
Okay, thank you, Paul, and thank you, James, for the presentation. I'm going to go to the poll question and ask all of our attendees today to please go ahead and choose a response from this poll question. The question is, I'd like more information on the following. Also, if you're listening on live day, especially today, and you've got questions for our speakers, go ahead and use the Ask a Question box and add those questions for James and for Paul. We've got a nice big chunk of time, and they can tell you tales from the front on how to affect this kind of change among your workforce. So, guys, we'll go ahead and get started. The first question focuses on the CMMS system itself. Let's see. I've wanted a CMMS system for years, but my boss cannot get past the cost. Usually saying it's just too expensive. Do you have any advice for this questioner about either building the business case or what arguments will resonate with the executive suites when it comes to CMS implementation? It is one of the most common sentences that are essentially in the sales phase of acquiring this. And I think the first and most important thing is it's not a question of cost. It's a question of return on that cost. It's a question of value. You just picture when one of your critical assets is down unexpectedly. Of course, it's going to happen right when you're on a big production run, and you've got everybody screaming at you. You got finance, you got production, you got sales, everybody's screaming at you. And it all comes down to some poor maintenance. The cost that does to your organization, if we could have just headed that off at the pass, or how are we in today's webinar, the changing workforce, if we can do more with the people we have, because we know it's going to be harder to replace these retiring people. There's a real cost to that. So switch the conversation from how much is this CMMS going to cost me to showing your management, showing the people in the decision process is, here's why we can't, this is why we have to have this. This is why it gives us an amazing leg up. This is where the return on this investment is so important.
Yeah, I'd like to add something in there.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so, the cost, it's everything trickles down, and almost every time you bring something up like this, it's always, well, what's it going to cost us? And like you said, Paul, the cost is almost alleviated right out of the gate when you're really able to put this data in and drive results like we had. The success that we've had with the software has been so tremendous that I mean, the software pays for itself almost in the first month of every year we use it. I mean, it's predicting down times. It's predicting what equipment is aged and due for replacement, where our weak points are. It saves us so much money in the back end that really the cost is probably not enough, you know what I mean? It's funny to say that, but everything starts with cost, but I think really once you dive into it, you'll see that there's an ROI on it that is more than acceptable.
Well, that's really powerful, especially the speed of ROI payback. I mean, when you just said there, James, 1 month usually pays for the cost of the investment. I've heard people also use their CMMS for different projects too, not just workflow and work order management, but there was a couple of guys I knew at a furniture manufacturer who used it simply to ground truth their budget process to find out what different facilities were charging for what tasks. So it's versatile in that way too.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'll say, Tom, too, that I use Asset Essentials. I'm starting to use, I should say, to really build my budget for the next year and the current year and kind of keep track of everything that way.
All right. Well, we have a question that is related to the slide on Praise Your Champion. It's a little bit of a different change of direction. The question is, Paul or James, how can I encourage my team to leave a legacy that they are proud of? You didn't touch on that celebration process. Let's celebrate each win, that kind of thing.
Well, I tell you, that question probably came in before my last thing, so I'll kind of say it again. Is like, what better way to honor your veteran team by just capturing? Because before CMMS was around, CMMS has been around for a while, but before it was around, everything was maybe partially written down, but it was almost all work. A new person was hired, you trained them by following and shadowing. Nobody sat there and read standard operating procedures back then, and you learn by doing. And we don't have the time to do that anymore, especially in this changing workforce. But what better way to honor these people by following them around, capturing them, hopefully with video and pictures, to really punctuate what written instructions can do. And see, and so you may see the video of that person for years and years to follow because they were the best to do that in their day, and now they're teaching people long after they're gone from the organization.
Yeah, I agree with you, Paul. I mean, that's the biggest one. That the sense of pride that they take in making sure that say we created that digital document from their process, and then they get to see it and analyze it and see how much other people are taking from that. It is a legacy at that point.
That's well, we have a question related to this process you're talking about, especially Paul with business continuity and knowledge capture. The question is, several members of my team are older, and they have been resistant to software in the past. I want the analytics, but I struggle with my team, I'm guessing especially those members, to embrace these new tools. When it comes to managing these changes, what's the best place to start? I know you guys went over that a little bit in the presentation, but any specific advice for bringing in people who are resistant?
But one of the good things about that question is the person who's asking it at least they recognize that using, say, a mobile device with their team is something that they know they need to get to that point. For previous decades, even management had a hard time seeing the value. Oh, my team's never gonna be able to use mobile devices. They're gonna sit there and surf the web all day. Now that we are really recognizing, and James said it, like the vast majority of his team is using the mobile. Now that we recognize how important, say, a mobile device is for doing your maintenance, it really does come down to the highlight the benefits of why you're going to do that, the ease of use of these systems nowadays, especially with our solution. And you get just a couple of those champions to just get a few basic tasks. And right on the screen, you can see a list of your work orders. You can touch that work order, and you can check it off as closed. I mean, anybody can do that. Now, hopefully they're doing more. Hopefully they're putting some notes in and they're filling out other fields. But maybe at the beginning you don't need to do that. Do the basics. and get them to see that value. Your champions are essential in that process. And so it's not being crammed from management down that you have to do it, but by their fellow teammates say, hey, this is not as hard as you think. Let me show you, and get that to really register in that maybe hesitant person's mind to do that. James, have you got any examples?
Yeah, I mean, something that I would start with is it looks like you're going on the right path. I mean, you acknowledge that there's an issue there, the resistance. What I would challenge them to do is list, their issues with using the new software, and even putting it in their hands and letting them, walk around with it and work through it and write down the challenges that they're experiencing, if any, and work on training through those challenges and, show them that there's answers to these issues, and it may not be as difficult as what they thought, and it might open their minds, and then you'll find your champions through doing that, I believe.
It's interesting. We do a workforce survey with plant services readers every 18 months, and we just finished our last survey about August, September of last year. One of the most striking generational results, as long as the questioner brought up generations, was that 80% of our millennial respondents said to us that corporate culture was the biggest influence on whether they were going to stay or whether they're going to go. And when I hear you both talk about setting the example of collaboration, setting the example of starting small and moving forward, it seems that setting that example of openness, collaboration is so key. It's not just to help other people who are less technology savvy on board, but to keep the people who will be doing the mentoring and teaching from that perspective on teaching the technology.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, James.
Oh, I was just gonna second that. I mean, it's critical, and to have that thinking is almost the only way to be successful moving forward. You just got to be open, and by writing down these issues, I think you really challenge yourself to really think about, is that an issue that is that major to me, or maybe looking at it now on paper, I can find that answer myself.
Yeah, and I was going to add, too, the technical, we talked about the three keys: technical skills, digital skills. The third one, soft skills. It's a much more esoteric topic, but it just hammers what it really reinforces what you're saying, Tom, is if your organization is not addressing the cultural aspects of these different generations working together and really understanding how a millennial, a Gen Z, a baby boomer, how they think and operate and what works for them and get them to work. If you're not addressing that, it becomes a lot more difficult for your technology and your digital skills to make up for. That's why it's important to address from all three standpoints.
Right. No, great point. And I think it ties into our next question. For the record, we have time for maybe one or two more questions. So anybody who does have questions for Paul or James, go ahead and keep typing them in the Ask a Question box. This is a question which, Paul, I know I heard you touch on it a little bit ago. It is on that business continuity and knowledge capture. So we'll get right to it. What's the best way to leverage knowledge from employees who are retiring sooner rather than later? And do you have any best practice ideas when it comes to documenting or capturing that historical knowledge from employees?
I'll address this briefly, and then I think James probably he lives it. But if you literally follow around, and this takes time, this takes an investment to do this, but you've got to do it. But you literally follow them around. I mean, you can take your iPhone, you can take your Android device, and when they go to do a standard PM task, capture a little video, take a couple of screenshots. You don't have to hire a professional film crew to do this. And take the time to really make sure you have easily consumed basic instructions that go along with that. Nobody's going to sit there and read a full-fledged manual when they're doing a basic PM on something. Hopefully they're not having to do that. But really come up with a nice balance of visual and written instructions to really reinforce that new young person who's coming up to do it.
Yeah, I second you, Paul, on following them around, capturing those critical procedures, the steps and the tasks that they're taking. And I think the biggest part, too, or one of the biggest parts is after you're done capturing that and producing what you think is an acceptable SOP based off of that, let them review it and say, oh, now that I'm watching this, I actually did something that you didn't capture here, and go back and add that in, or maybe take another snapshot of this process here that wasn't really highlighted because you just may not know.
Well, I'm going to throw one last question at you from our attendees, and here's the yes or no question. Does Dude Solutions run only in the cloud? My company requires a locally installed server solution.
Yeah, we are only cloud-based. This is it's becoming pretty rare that organizations require it to be an on-premise solution. I can understand in certain types of industries that are highly, highly sensitive or regulated where they're not allowed to be in the cloud, but even that's becoming incredibly rare. I would first try to address, and this is something that if you reach out to our organization, there's lots of very, very critical information that your organization needs to hear about why running in the cloud is safe, is secure. It's probably more safe and secure than running on your own premise. The total cost of ownership is lower. You're not having to deal with your own servers and hardware and people to run that. You're always on the latest version. You have access to that software from anywhere. It's no coincidence that all new software that's coming on the marketplace is cloud-enabled, cloud-run, or some aspect of cloud-based, if not 100% cloud-based like we are. So I would try to challenge your management team to find out, again, if there is some legal reason why you have to be on-premise. But if it's just sort of the nature of your management team, then give us an opportunity to talk to them to explain the benefits of cloud-based software, because it's significant, and there's really you're not going to find on-premise software anymore. It just doesn't exist. Nobody's really writing it anymore. They haven't for years.
Yeah, it's funny, Paul, with cloud-based solutions too. Real quick, we're hearing from risk mitigation specialists that actually having a cloud-based solution, as you're talking about, is becoming more prevalent because it's part of your business continuity. It reduces the risk of any sort of cyber attack locking down your premise server. And then James, I heard you. You're going to tell us.
Yeah, so this was actually one of my biggest challenges that I lived with trying to implement a cloud-based CMMS. We had a server-only solution due to the mentality of some of our older IT team members that just had no trust in the cloud at all. And I want to honestly say that was my biggest hurdle over cost or anything else is, well, if it's not going to be on our server, we can't use it. And so my issue with the server side was using the software anywhere. We still had a mobile app with this other software we're using, but say I went on the roof to perform work, it lost connection, and then I went to go update, I lost data, something didn't refresh. So I was able to, through a lot of work and documentation, prove why the server side was not the best option.
Well, and my takeaway from hearing you guys talk about this is that this may be a question that's out there, but it's starting to be less of a question, and then there are ways to overcome that kind of objection from the C-suite.
Absolutely.
Well, guys, we are about 90 seconds out from the end of today's webinar, so I'm going to ask Louise stop the questions there. Anyone who does have further questions for Paul and for James, go ahead and keep asking them in the Ask a Question box. I'll go ahead and move to close out then, and I will just say first to our presenters today, to Paul LaChance and James McGavero, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Tom.
Yes, thank you. It was a pleasure.
I'd also like to say a special thank you to our sponsor, Dude Solutions, for making today's webinar possible, and to everyone who attended today and is listening on demand. This webinar has been recorded and will be available shortly for on-demand viewing. You're also encouraged to visit plantservices.com to gain access to even more tools and resources aimed at helping you achieve success. I'll call your attention one last time to the handouts area, which is still live right now. The full set of speaker slides from Paul's and James' presentation are available right now, as well as the case study on Jake's Finer Foods, a white paper on navigating the workforce, and the guide to becoming preventative maintenance all-star. If you like this presentation, please let us know your thoughts by answering the brief survey that will appear on your screen in about 15 seconds. Your candid answers are not only appreciated, they help us to craft future and better events. So one last thank you to James and Paul, a thank you to Do Solutions, and thank you for attending today. Have a great rest of the day.